My name is Audrey. A year ago, life sucker punched us. Our little boy, our 9-year-old Mikey, lost his battle with leukemia. My husband Mark, a factory engineer, and I, an economist, were left grappling with a loss too immense to comprehend. Mikey wasn't just our son. He was our sunshine, our hope, our joy. He was a spitfire full of life and laughter. Even when the illness tried to dim his light, he'd look at us with his big, brave eyes and say, "I'm going to beat this, Mom. You watch." And we believed him because he was our little warrior. I remember the day he was diagnosed. We were in the doctor's office, holding on to each other and to hope. The doctor, with a grave face, told us, "I'm sorry, it's leukemia." The room went quiet. It felt like the air had been sucked out of it. Mark was the first to break the silence. "We'll fight it," he said, his voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." And fight we did. The days turned into a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and countless prayers. Mikey, bless his heart, fought like a champ. He'd throw up and cry from the pain, but then wipe his tears and say, "Is that all you got, cancer?" But the disease was relentless. It took away his energy, his laughter, his hair, but not his spirit. He'd lay in his hospital bed, frail and tired, but still managed to give us a thumbs up. "I'm good, Dad. I'm good," he'd say, trying to reassure us. The day we lost him, Mark and I were at home, waiting for a call from the hospital. The phone rang, and Mark picked it up. His face went white. He didn't have to say anything. Knew our little warrior was gone. Mark finally found his voice. He's gone, Audrey," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I remember collapsing onto the floor, Mark holding me as we cried. For months, our house felt like a tomb, silent and cold. I spent days in bed, lost in my grief. Mark tried to keep it together for both of us. He'd go to work, come back, and hold me as I cried. One day, I found him in Mikey's room, holding his favorite action figure. He was crying, his body shaking with sobs. I sat next to him, and we mourned together. We mourned for our boy, for the life he could have had, for the dreams that would never come true. After we lost our Mikey, I was stuck in a dark place. It felt like I was trapped in a never-ending tunnel with no light at the end. But Mark, my husband, refused to let me sink. He was hurting too, but he put on a brave face for us. Every morning, he'd gently shake me awake. "Audrey, time to rise and shine," he'd say. I'd just grunt, pulling the duvet over my head. I wanted to hide, to escape the harsh reality that our boy was no longer with us. But Mark, he was relentless. He'd sit on the edge of the bed, his hand finding mine under the covers. "We got to keep moving, Audrey, for Mikey," he'd say. His voice was always steady, but I could hear the underlying pain. So I started getting up. It felt like moving mountains. The world outside seemed too harsh, too real. Every little thing reminded me of Mikey, but I pushed through the pain. I started doing simple things, cooking breakfast, washing clothes. They were just everyday chores, but they kept me anchored, stopping me from losing myself in grief. Mark and I started taking walks in the evening. We'd walk hand in hand, mostly in silence. Sometimes we'd talk about Mikey. Remember the time Mikey tried to make pancakes and nearly burnt the house down? Mark would chuckle, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. We'd laugh together, and for a fleeting moment, the crushing weight of grief would lift. One day, out of the blue, Mark brought home a puppy, a golden retriever, the kind Mikey always begged us for. "Thought this little guy might help," he said, his eyes pleading for my approval. I was startled. I didn't know if I was ready for another living being in our life, another soul to love and potentially lose. But I looked into the puppy's innocent eyes, and my heart melted. We named him Buddy. He was a bundle of energy, always scampering around, gnawing at our shoes. He brought a sense of life back into our home. His playful barks and whimpers filled the deafening silence that had settled since Mikey's departure. In a strange way, Buddy helped us heal. He gave us something to focus on, a distraction from our pain. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. There were days when the grief was so overwhelming, I felt like I was drowning. But then I'd look at Mark and Buddy, and I'd find a shred of strength to keep going. I found courage in their love and resilience. Living without Mikey was something I couldn't have ever imagined, but we were doing it, one agonizing day at a time. We were finding strength in each other and in the memories of our beautiful boy. We were learning to live with our loss, finding small moments of happiness amidst the sorrow. It was a slow, painful process, but we were making progress. Finding strength after losing a part of your soul is not easy. It's a battle, an uphill walk, but it's a battle worth fighting because, when all is said and done, life goes on and we need to move with it. No matter how painful it is for us, we do it for our Mikey, because that's what he would have wanted. He was our little warrior, and we needed to honor his memory by living, by finding strength in our loss. "Hey, Audrey," Mark began, breaking the silence. We were sitting on the porch, just watching the sun go down, the cool evening breeze rustling the leaves. Buddy was off somewhere, probably digging another hole in the yard. "I've been thinking," he said. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah?" I asked, waiting for him to continue. Mark was always a man of few words, so when he said he'd been thinking, it usually meant something serious. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been thinking about us having another kid," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I just stared at him, unable to process his words. Another kid. Was he out of his mind? We'd lost our Mikey, and he was talking about having another child. "Are you crazy, Mark?" I finally blurted out, my heart pounding in my chest. "We can't just replace Mikey." Mark shook his head quickly. "No, Audrey, I don't mean replace him. God, I could never do that. I miss it, Audrey. I miss being a dad. I miss our family." I could see the pain in his eyes, the longing. I understood what he was saying. I missed being a mom, too. I missed the laughter, the chaos, the love, but the thought of having another child scared me. It felt like a betrayal to Mikey. "I don't know, Mark," I said, my voice shaky. "It feels like we'd be betraying Mikey." Mark reached out, taking my hands in his. "Audrey, we could never betray Mikey. He'll always be our son, our firstborn. But I believe we have more love to give, and I think Mikey would want us to be happy." His words hit me hard. I knew he was right. Mikey wouldn't want us to live in sorrow forever. He would want us to move on, to find happiness again. But the thought of loving another child was terrifying. "I'm scared, Mark," I admitted, tears welling up in my eyes. "I'm scared of loving another child, scared of losing another one." Mark squeezed my hands, his eyes filled with understanding. "I'm scared too, Audrey, but I think we can do this, for us, for Mikey." We sat there holding hands as the sun set, the world seeming to hold its breath, waiting for my response. After what felt like an eternity, I finally found my voice. "Okay, Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's do it. Let's have another child." Mark looked at me, his eyes filled with relief and joy. "Really, Audrey?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, Mark, let's give it a shot." And that was it. We decided to try for another child. It was a scary decision, but it felt right. We had love to give, and we wanted to be parents again. Most importantly, we wanted to honor Mikey. We wanted to live again, to find happiness for us and for Mikey. The smell of Mary's famous roast chicken and baked potatoes wafted through the house. Bill, Mark's dad, was at the head of the table, carving the chicken with precision. Mark's sister Linda, her husband Bob, and their son John were also there. Linda was always a bit of a loose cannon, with a knack for saying the most outrageous things without batting an eye. Tonight she was in full form, leaning back in her chair and holding court, her voice loud and clear, her laughter ringing out. She had a glass of red wine in her hand, waving it around as she spoke, drops occasionally splashing onto the tablecloth. We were halfway through the meal, just making small talk, when Linda turned to Mark and me. "So, Audrey, Mark," she began, a smirk on her face, "I've been thinking about Mikey's college fund." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Mikey's college fund was something Mark's grandma had set up for him when he was born. It was supposed to be for his future, for his education, but Mikey was gone. Linda, with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, continued, "Well, since Mikey isn't going to use it, I thought maybe John could have it." I felt like the world had stopped spinning. I just stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. She wanted us to give Mikey's college fund to John. I glanced at Mark, but he seemed just as shell-shocked as I was. Linda, oblivious to our shock, went on, "I mean, John's starting college next year, and it's not like Mikey's going to need it, right?" The room fell silent. I could see Mary and Bill exchanging worried glances while Bob just stared at his plate. My hands were shaking. I was furious and hurt. How could Linda be so heartless, so selfish? I felt a lump in my throat and tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I swallowed hard, forcing them back. I wasn't going to give Linda the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "Linda," I said, my voice shaking, "that money was for Mikey. It's not yours to give away." Linda just shrugged, a smug smile on her face. "Well, it's not like Mikey's going to use it, is he?" she retorted. I was speechless. I just stared at her, my mind a whirl of emotions. I wanted to yell at her to tell her how wrong she was, but I was too hurt. "Linda, that was low, even for you." I finally managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "That was cruel and inappropriate." Linda just shrugged again, feigning innocence. "What? I'm just being practical," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely remember what was said or what was eaten. All I could think about was Linda's audacity. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her take Mikey's college fund. It was his and would always be his, no matter what Linda said. After that bombshell dinner, Mark and I found ourselves in the sanctuary of our home, both still reeling from Linda's audacious proposition. The night was still, the only sound being the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Mark was slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. I was pacing the room, my mind racing. "Can you believe her, Mark?" I exploded, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "The nerve of that woman." Mark didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, shoulders hunched. Finally, he looked up at me, his face pale. "I know, Audrey," he said, his voice heavy. I can't believe it either. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of Linda's words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke up. "We can't let her have Mikey's money, Mark," I said firmly. "It's not hers to take." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Audrey," he said, "and we won't. That money was for Mikey. It's his." "She doesn't see it that way," I retorted, my voice rising. "She just sees it as free money." Mark reached out, taking my hand in his. "Audrey, we can't let her get to us," he said, his voice steady. "We know what's right, and we'll fight for it." I nodded, biting my lip. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice shaky. "We can't let her win." Mark squeezed my hand, giving me a small smile. "And besides," he added softly, "that money will be useful when we have our own baby." His words gave me hope, even though we had been trying for a baby for a while with no luck. Just then, my phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, my heart pounding. It was Bob, Linda's husband. "Audrey, I'm sorry," he said, his voice apologetic. "I didn't know Linda was going to say that. I don't agree with her." His words were a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. I thanked him, my voice shaky, and hung up. The morning after Linda's outrageous proposition, I was still fuming. The audacity of that woman. I'd always known she was selfish, but this was a new low. I decided to do some digging. If Linda was willing to stoop so low as to ask for Mikey's money, who knew what else she was capable of? I fired up my laptop and logged into Facebook. I cringed as I typed Linda's name into the search bar. I hadn't visited her profile in years, and for good reason. The woman was insufferable, but this was important. I needed to know what she was up to. As I scrolled through her profile, my blood began to boil. There she was, flaunting her new designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and lavish vacations. Our mutual friends were gushing over her extravagant lifestyle in the comments. I decided to reach out to one of them, a woman named Susan who I'd always liked. She was down to earth and honest, and I trusted her. I sent her a message asking about Linda's recent spending spree. "Oh, Audrey," she replied, her words appearing on my screen. "You have no idea. Linda's been living it up. She's been spending money like there's no tomorrow." I felt a knot in my stomach. "But what about John's college fund?" I asked. "Isn't she worried about that?" Susan's reply was immediate. "Audrey, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Linda's already spent all that money on herself." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Linda had spent John's college fund on herself. I couldn't believe it. But then again, maybe I could. This was Linda we were talking about, after all. I thanked Susan for her honesty and logged off. I felt sick to my stomach. Linda had spent all of John's money, and now she wanted Mikey's. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. I sat there staring at my screen, my mind racing. I was furious, but more than that, I was determined. Linda had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark's number. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk. It's about Linda." Mark was silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice grim. "What has she done now, Audrey?" I took a deep breath. "She spent all of John's college fund, Mark," I said, "on herself." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "I can't believe it," Mark said, his voice shaky. "That's selfish. I can't believe she'd do something like that." "I know, Mark," I replied, my voice calm. "But we can't let her get away with it. We need to stop her from Mikey." There was a long pause. Then Mark spoke, his voice resolute. "You're right, Audrey. We need to stop her." As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of determination. Linda had shown her true colors, and they were ugly. But we weren't going to let her win. Not this time. Not ever. I called up Mark's folks and told them to drop everything and meet me at their house. The atmosphere was as thick as pea soup when I walked into their living room. I took a deep breath and spilled the beans. "Linda's blown all of John's college cash," I said, my voice shaky. "On herself." Mark's dad, a big burly guy who usually had a smile on his face, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "That rotten," he snarled, his voice echoing through the room. Mark's mom, a sweet old lady who always had a kind word for everyone, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Our own daughter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could she?" Mark, who'd been as quiet as a mouse, finally piped up. "We aren't going to let her get away with this," he said, his voice as hard as nails. "We're going to fight her on this." The very next day, I was at home when I heard a loud bang on the door. It was Linda, her face red as a beetroot. "You ratted me out," she hissed, her eyes blazing like a wildfire. "You told them about the money." "I did," I said, standing my ground. "That money wasn't yours, Linda. It was for John's schooling, not for you to blow on fancy clothes and shoes." Linda's face turned an ugly shade of purple. "You're going to pay for this," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll wish you never crossed me." With that, she stormed off, leaving me shaking in my boots. I knew then that Linda meant business, But I also knew that I couldn't back down. Not now. A couple of days later, I went to visit Mikey's grave. As I got closer, I noticed something was off. The flowers I'd left were trampled, and the small angel statue I'd placed by the headstone was smashed to bits. My heart sank. I knew who'd done this. I immediately called the cops. They showed up in no time and started poking around. After a while, they told me they'd found some footage from the security cameras at the cemetery. It was Linda. She was the one who trashed Mikey's grave. I called Mark, my voice trembling with rage. "Mark," I said, "Linda desecrated Mikey's grave." There was a pause on the other end, then Mark spoke, his voice colder than a winter's night. "That witch," he said. "I can't believe she'd stoop so low." "We got to do something, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "We can't let her keep doing this to us." As I put down the phone, I felt a surge of determination. Linda had shown just how far she was willing to go, but we weren't about to let her get away with it. We were going to fight her every step of the way. For Mikey, for John, for all of us. After Linda's nasty stunt, we gave her the cold shoulder. No more Sunday dinners, no more family gatherings. She was out, plain and simple. Even her own husband, Bob, couldn't stand the sight of her. He served her the divorce papers quicker than you can say Jack Robinson. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow, realizing his own wife had turned out to be such a snake in the grass. The fallout from Linda's betrayal was like a bomb going off in our lives, but it also brought Mark and me closer. We were in the same boat, dealing with the same pain. We leaned on each other, helped each other through the tough times. We became more than just in-laws. We became allies and friends. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Slowly but surely we picked up the pieces. We were a team, and nothing could break us. Not Linda, not her betrayal, nothing. One day I went to visit Mikey's grave. It was a sunny day, and the cemetery was peaceful. I sat down next to his headstone, feeling a strange sense of calm. "Hey, Mikey," I said softly. "I miss you, kiddo, but I want you to know we're doing okay. We're sticking together, just like you'd want." I felt a soft breeze on my face, like a gentle caress. I smiled. "I know you're watching over us, Mikey. We'll make you proud." As I walked away from the cemetery, I felt a sense of peace. We had been through hell and back, but we were still standing. We were stronger than ever and ready to face whatever life had in store for us. In the midst of all this chaos, I found out I was expecting. When I told Mark, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Audrey," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "this is the best news I've heard in a long time." I smiled at him, my heart swelling with love. "I thought you'd be happy." He pulled me into his arms, his eyes shining. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it, Audrey. This is a miracle, a blessing." He paused, deep in thought. "The money we plan to spend on Mikey's education, we'll use it for our unborn child. We'll give them the best life possible." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I think Mikey would have wanted that. As we sat there planning for the future, I felt a sense of hope. Despite everything, we were moving forward. We were turning our pain into something positive, and I knew deep down that we were going to be okay. We were going to make it together.
How could he do this to us? I muttered under my breath, bile rising in my throat as I took in the sight before me. My loving husband of 15 years, John, was strolling through the amusement park, his arm wrapped around the waist of a tall blonde. Laughing alongside them was a young boy around 6 or 7, gleefully clutching a stuffed animal prize. I grabbed Lily's hand, my fingers trembling. "Lily, honey," I choked out. "Let's go on the carousel, okay?" I steered my confused daughter away from the painful scene, barely holding myself together. Just hours earlier, John had kissed Lily on the cheek and wished her a happy birthday before rushing off for an emergency client meeting. And here he was, breaking promise after promise. I helped Lily onto a painted horse before settling onto my own with a deep exhale, struggling to gather my swirling thoughts. John and I had been college sweethearts, two idealistic kids ready to take on the world, mooning over dreams of a perfect family someday. After graduation, through lean times and multiple job switches, we had built a good life together. Or so I believed. We both worked hard, John as a marketing director and me a freelance CPA, hustling to pay the bills and save for Lily's future while still finding little moments of joy together as family. Sure, money had been tighter since I stepped back on work to care for Lily, and our date nights weren't as frequent anymore amid our tiring routines. But I thought our relationship was rooted in devotion and trust. I even overlooked John's recent distractedness as work stress. Oh, how wrong I was, that sneaking bastard! I glanced over at Lily, who was happily oblivious, giggling away on her carousel horse, my heart squeezed with anger at John's careless selfishness. By running off with some tramp, he was also abandoning his daughter on her 10th birthday. As we walked around after the ride, I slipped into numb autopilot, not trusting myself to hold it together if I dwelled any more on John's betrayal. I had to put on a brave smile for Lily's sake on her special day. We played carnival games, snacked on cotton candy, and laughed on the roller coasters. With each passing moment, though, I struggled to bury the simmering hurt and fury. Finally, as we exited yet another ride, Lily turned to me with questioning eyes. "Mom, it's been really fun today, but I kinda thought Dad would be here too." She trailed off uncertainly. "Is he going to come later for the fireworks?" The hope shining through my little girl's face unleashed a floodgate of long-suppressed emotions. I couldn't hold back the burning tears anymore. "Oh, sweetheart," I wrapped Lily in a fierce, protective hug as sobs racked my body. She deserved to know the truth. I swiped at my running mascara and met her alarmed eyes. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I saw your dad here earlier. He was with another lady and boy." I watched Lily closely for her reaction. Confusion clouded her features. "What do you mean with them?" she asked hesitantly. I took a deep breath before continuing gently. "Honey, he had his arm around that woman, like he does with me sometimes, and he was playing with the boy too, winning him prizes." Lily's face fell as understanding dawned. "You mean, like a date? But dads don't go on dates with other moms. Does this mean he doesn't want to spend time with us anymore?" My heart cracked hearing the tremor in her small voice. I squared my shoulders, steeling my resolve right then. John may have betrayed me as a partner, but I would not let him hurt my little girl so callously. "Oh, Lily, I honestly don't know why your dad did this, but no matter what, we have each other. I'll always be here for you, okay?" I squeezed her hand supportively. Lily rushed into my arms again, hugging me tightly. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. Those 4 words were like a soothing balm, nourishing my soul and strengthening my conviction to shield Lily from further heartache in whatever ways necessary. As I held my brave daughter close, staring out at the colorful horizon, I sensed a new chapter dawning. No more blind trust without verification when it came to John. For Lily's well-being, I would get to the bottom of his shady behavior. If he thought he could just walk all over us while I dutifully covered for him, he had another thing coming. For now, I had a little girl's birthday magic to preserve at all costs. But soon enough, John would have to own up. Justice would be served one way or another. After all, this was just Act 1, and the real fireworks were yet to come. Over the next few weeks, I struggled to act normal whenever John was around. I didn't dare confront him yet without concrete proof of his betrayal. So I swallowed the acid words on the tip of my tongue each time he casually pecked my check after returning home late from another business meeting. The gnawing pit in my stomach grew more cavernous with each of his transparent lies. My raging suspicions were all but confirmed when I overheard John murmuring affectionately into his phone one night after he assumed I was asleep. I crept closer to the home office door and pressed my ear against it. "I missed you too, Jess," John chuckled softly. "Yesterday was so much fun. I can't stop thinking about our time together." Jess. Short for Jessica, perhaps? So the backstabbing weasel was on a first-name basis with his floozy girlfriend. I dug my nails into my clammy palms, struggling to restrain my disgust. John continued reminiscing in hushed tones about some resort getaway filled with cozy dinners and stolen kisses. My lungs constricted, bile rising in my throat. So, while John claimed to be on work trips, he was actually wining and dining his mistress at fancy hotels. I couldn't stomach hearing another word. I retreated back to our bedroom on unsteady feet, my earlier suspicion hardening into cold, hard fury. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at school before driving over to John's office. I simply had to clear the air once and for all. Surely there was an innocent misunderstanding. My loyal husband of 15 years would never actually cheat on me. With every mile, I desperately tried convincing myself of this alternate rosy reality. But when I stepped through the polished doors, my last hopes were dashed. "Why, yes, John Mitchell just left for Memphis," his startled secretary Evelyn confirmed. "He'll be meeting clients there before returning next Tuesday." Memphis, not the Jersey headquarters he had specifically mentioned to me in passing over breakfast. Throat constricting, I turned on my heels and fled to the safety of my vehicle before Evelyn could glimpse the hot tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Resting my head warily against the steering wheel, my last illusions withered away. My husband was indeed having an affair behind my back. Over the next week, my state of mind deteriorated into a foggy mess of anxiety and sorrow. I continued probing for the elusive truth, despite already knowing it deep down. When John didn't return on the expected Tuesday, instead extending his trip another 4 days, I hit my breaking point. As I tidied his drawers while sorting laundry, a flowery perfume wafted out that I didn't recognize. Underneath the folds, a lace negligee of a much smaller size than my own laid provocatively. That did it. All restraint evaporated instantly like steam. Snatching my purse with trembling hands while fighting angry tears, I convinced our next-door neighbor Jane to watch Lily for the night. Before I lost my nerve, I hopped into an Uber bound for the seedier side of town. It was time for drastic measures. I hesitated only briefly outside room 17B as the muffled sounds of ecstasy leaked under the door. Then, steeling my shaking bones, I boldly pushed inside. The exhibition of twisting limbs and tangled sheets burned my eyes, but I forced myself to keep watching through narrowed slits. No backing down now. I needed to see my cheating scumbag husband in all his whoring glory to file for the strongest divorce case possible. To think I had wasted years of loyalty and intimacy on this spineless loser humping the mattress without a care in the world. As they both erupted into climax, I whipped out my smartphone to capture the money shot. Click, click, click. Undisputable proof of adultery. No denying it now with this lurid footage in hand. "What the hell?" John shouted as the naked woman under him, likely Jessica, let loose an ear-piercing shriek. Their interlocked body parts scrambled to hide under the rumpled covers, but I had already seen enough. More than enough for multiple lifetimes, unfortunately. I smirked vindictively, pocketing my smoking gun evidence as the color drained from John's stubbled features. He began sputtering. "Susan, I can exp," but I slammed the door mid-sentence. Time to finally bust this pathetic cheater with the power of truth. My fulminating heart nearly rejoiced, picturing the fallout headed his way. The amusement park stretched before us in all its frenetic glory, a whirling kaleidoscope of colors under the bright summer sun. I squeezed Lily's hand tightly, hoping to infuse some of my nervous energy into her smaller frame. As we walked through the cheering crowds, nausea churned my otherwise empty stomach. This was it, the confrontation I had obsessed over planning since that sordid night at the hotel. When I stumbled upon John canoodling his busty mistress mid-thrust, I knew my decade-long marriage was finished. Once Lily turned 18, there would be nothing binding me to that cheating scumbag any longer. But I couldn't let my sweet Lily go on believing in her father's devotion any longer either. She had moped for days when John missed her chorus recital to extend his work trip. Meanwhile, that two-timing bastard was likely wining and dining Jessica at some five-star restaurant without a care in the world. An acidic fury licked my veins, imagining Lily continuing to pine for her father's affection that would never come. No, it was time she witnessed exactly what John prioritized over family. I would finally expose his true duplicitous colors. As we meandered through the park, scanning the swelling crowds, my heart pounded a frantic staccato beat. Where was that rat? Lily prattled on excitedly about rides, but her voice faded to background static against the rushing blood in my ears. And then suddenly, I spotted him. Talking to a caramel-haired woman by the funnel cake stand, his beefy arm draped possessively around her waist. At their feet stood a young boy with a thatch of chestnut hair, likely no older than 7. He was eagerly stuffing his face with confetti-dusted fried dough, getting sugar all over his round cheeks. My fists involuntarily clenched, and I nudged Lily gently. "See that man over there in the red shirt, sweetie?" I softly murmured against her hair. As she glanced over, her eyes doubled in size. "Daddy?" Lily screeched in disbelief. "Who is that lady with him and the little boy?" She whipped her head back and forth between me and John frantically as realization sunk in. Meanwhile, John had heard Lily's cry, his cocky grin melting like hot wax. His arm dropped from Jessica's waist as they spun to face us. I stalked closer, keeping a firm grip on Lily's clammy palm. Halting an arm's length away, I fixed my estranged husband with a blistering glare that could melt steel. "Well, isn't this quite the father-son outing, John?" I spat, vitriol coating each syllable. "Or maybe this blonde bombshell is just your new mommy replacement for when I kick you to the curb." John paled further as a sheen of sweat beaded his pasty skin. "Susan, let me explain," he choked out weakly. I cut off his pathetic sputtering with a disgusted snort as Jessica stared fixedly at the ground. "Save your smarmy excuses. Nothing justifies abandoning your wife and daughter to play house with this home-wrecking bimbo." I growled savagely. Meanwhile, poor Lily looked utterly lost and crestfallen as her fantasy father figure withered before her eyes. Seeing those fat alligator tears shimmering along her lashes fueled my raging inferno even hotter. "Is this why you are always too busy with work to spend time with me, Daddy?" Lily finally croaked out. John's shoulders slumped further as shame painted his features. He reached towards our daughter pleadingly, but she instantly recoiled several steps. "Bug, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt you or Mommy." I quickly intervened before he could poison Lily's mind with more deception. Having my innocent child comforting this cheating trash was unacceptable. Snatching Lily close before she could absorb more trauma, I addressed John with blistering contempt. "You sniveling coward are hereby cut off from our lives. I wasted too many years blinded by your lies already. Let's go, Lily." Keeping my head high, I steered us swiftly towards the park exit without another backwards glance. As we retreated from the battlegrounds, a bittersweet sensation flooded my frayed nerves. I had shielded Lily from further manipulation and uncover the ugly truth as promised. She would undoubtedly have many confusing emotions to process in the coming days. But moving forward, we could rebuild our lives free of John's contaminating presence. What lay ahead might seem uncertain, but embracing this new destiny solo could only lead to bigger and better things. I awoke with a jolt, instantly oriented to my unfamiliar surroundings. The floral wallpaper and lacy curtains were a far cry from my bedroom's simple blue hues. Then the events of the previous night came thundering back. That disastrous confrontation at the amusement park, which ended with John pathetically begging on his knees, a snotty mess of tears and excuses. Jessica and her son had already scurried off by then, not daring to meet my incensed glare. The raging aftermath was truly a sight to behold, apparently, with crowds of spectators gawking. After threatening John with a restraining order if he dared show his despicable face again, I hurried a shell-shocked Lily back home to safety. We collapsed into bed early, emotionally drained from the day's dramatic unraveling. Now, as morning light bathed the cozy cottage interior, I heard a soft rap at the bedroom door. I opened it to find Lily's petite frame swimming in an oversized t-shirt, her blonde curls a tangled bedhead. Wordlessly, I pulled my baby girl close, cocooning her in my warmth. We soon headed downstairs, lured by the delicious scent of Alice's famous blueberry pancakes. My college roommate had graciously offered her seaside vacation home when she heard of my impending separation. "You and Lily take however long you need," Alice urged last night over the phone. "Frank and I rarely use the Cape May place anyway." So this would be our safe haven until the divorce dust settled and I figured out longer-term housing. John may have shattered my rosy dreams, but I refused to crumble. I had a child relying on me. After enjoying Alice's fluffy stacks drowned in maple and some much-needed girl talk, Lily wandered outside to explore the beach. Gazing after her through the large kitchen windows, I let out a heavy sigh. My poor daughter didn't deserve any of this ugliness and betrayal after already losing her mother so young. At that moment, my cell vibrated loudly against the granite countertops. I glanced down to see John's goofy contact photo flashing insistently. Speak of the devil himself. Swiping angrily, I answered the call. Might as well rip the Band-Aid off fully regarding where things stood. Susan! John's voice crackled desperately through the speakers. Thank God you answered. Please don't hang up. Rolling my eyes in disgust, I growled, You have 2 minutes, John. Make it quick. I just wanted to explain everything. This whole mess with Jessica just got out of hand. He rushed on, not bothering to hide the desperation in his tone. Please, I'll do anything. Counseling, quit my job, just don't leave. Are you quite finished? I snapped sharply. Why should I believe anything spewing from your lying mouth? Does our decade together mean so little that you'd throw it away for some cheap trollop? No, I swear she meant nothing, John sputtered. It was only a stupid fling. I was selfish and weak. But I want to fix us. Please, Susan, I'm begging you. Think of our family. His words ignited a white-hot fury. I briefly imagined marching over to throttle some sense into that thick, stupid skull. How dare you appeal to family values after sneaking around behind our backs for who knows how long? I saw the text messages and racy lingerie, John, I snarled. Man up and take accountability for once. Consider this your final notice that I'm filing for divorce. I relished hitting the red end button on his sputtering excuses, feeling fully empowered by my conviction. The rose-tinted glasses had shattered fully, leaving no doubt remaining. Loyalty meant nothing to someone who could lie through their teeth so easily to my face all this time. Well, no more. I refused to waste another minute questioning my worth because of his moral failing. A new life awaited where Lily and I could thrive happily without John's toxicity. My attorney had already been contacted to proceed with the separation filing. Today marked the first strides towards an abuse-free future. Heading back outside into the salty ocean breeze, I joined my daughter constructing sandcastles, the horizon filled with nothing but boundless possibility. I tapped my foot impatiently against the worn linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. Where was he? John better not stand me up again and leave me waiting here like an idiot. Not after explicitly requesting to meet one last time for closure. Mercifully, the nondescript diner door chimed open then. I spotted John shuffling towards my corner booth, appearing almost timid. Once seated across from me, though, his earlier contrition evaporated instantly. Leaning back against cracked red vinyl, John crossed his arms defiantly. All right, let's talk. But before you go making any rash decisions, Susan, hear me out. I want shared custody of Lily. I choked on my own saliva. Excuse me, you must be out of your mind, I countered through wheezing breaths. John barreled on aggressively. That adorable little girl deserves a father figure in her life. You honestly want to rob Lily of that joy? And disrupt her sense of normalcy even more? His beady eyes glinted with cunning determination. My fingernails carved half-moon indentations into my sweaty palms under the table. This manipulative snake thought he still could dictate terms? You lost any paternal privileges cheating on our family, John, I seethed quietly. Lily requires way more care and attention than you ever provided her anyway. Oh, please, John snorted derisively. I may have screwed up recently, but don't pretend it was all rainbows and sunshine before. With you off pampering high-end clients at all hours, poor Lily barely saw either of us most days. His accusations ignited my simmering rage into a full rolling boil. I fought the almost uncontrollable urge to lunge across the table and throttle John's thick neck. How dare you pin your neglect on my workload? I spat contemptuously instead. At least those clients guaranteed Lily's school funds, clothes, extracurriculars over the years, things she always had to beg her deadbeat father for. John at least had the decency to appear abashed, picking at non-existent lint. After a charged beat, he mumbled weakly, Jessica, she made me feel alive again, like before we became bogged down with so many responsibilities. Lifting his eyes beseechingly to meet my stony gaze, he implored, Can't we just try counseling, Susan? I can't lose you both. I surveyed John's aging visage critically, the wrinkles etching hard lines, bald patch spreading, and paunch steadily expanding. Was this really the same man I fell for years ago when his sculpted arms could effortlessly lift me against his firm chest? That John was long gone, apparently, replaced by this shallow, selfish imposter twiddling his thumbs across from me. I exhaled slowly, feeling the fight seep away. No, John. Too much damage is done. I saw the real you that night. Your complete apathy at destroying Lily's innocence and trust. As her mother, I refuse to let you keep poisoning her mind and self-worth. Pushing up from the table, I leaned across and fixed John with an icy glare. Consider this your final notice. If I see you anywhere near me or Lily again, I won't hesitate getting a restraining order. John lunged forward to grab my wrist pleadingly. Please, Susan, be reasonable. We can still fix this. I need you both. Wrenching my hand back forcefully, I tossed a crumpled 20 on the table that would easily cover both our untouched meals. John called after me desperately, but I didn't pause, pushing into bright daylight and taking a deep restorative gulp. The fresh outdoor air filled my lung with newfound clarity. I felt fully unburdened from my past illusions. John refusing accountability cemented I made the right call, kicking him to the curb for good. Settling behind my steering wheel, resolve coursed through me stronger than ever. I would inform my lawyer about John's delusional custody demands immediately to get that scum out of our lives quicker. The court would take one look at his sloppy appearance today, bloodshot eyes, tousled hair, mismatched shoes, and declare him an unfit parent easily. Peeling out onto the open road ahead, I cranked up the radio defiantly. 2 middle fingers saluted the shrinking diner behind me. John wanted a cutthroat legal battle? Oh, he would sorely regret awakening this mama bear's wrath. Deep breaths, Lily, sweetheart. We're in this together, okay? I squeezed my daughter's hand reassuringly as we exited the idling Uber. The courthouse facade towered over us, seeming to mock my frayed nerves. After months of exhausting paperwork, financial untangling, and legal maneuvering, we had finally arrived on Judgment Day. I prayed the Honorable Judge Dalton presiding over the proceedings today saw facts for what they were, that John was a lying, cheating scumbag undeserving of time with my precious daughter. As we navigated towards the assigned courtroom, a familiar grating voice accosted us from behind. There are my 2 favorite girls. Spinning on my kitten heels, I came face to face with the devil himself. John, in his grubby flesh and slightly disheveled suit, grinning like the moron he was. I quickly stepped in front of Lily, blocking his path. She peeked around my frame warily as I crossed my arms forbiddingly. Don't come any closer, John. We have nothing left to discuss. His greasy smile remained pasted in place. Susan, please, we shouldn't fight anymore. It's not good for Lily, he implored with faux sincerity. I just want to be a family again. Liar! Lily suddenly shouted, face scrunching angrily as she dodged under my arm. If you cared about me, you wouldn't have left us for that blonde witch. I gently tugged Lily back as she vented loudly. While immensely satisfied at my typically soft-spoken daughter finding her voice, I didn't need John's dramatics jeopardizing our case. Sure enough, he instantly switched tactics, amping up the waterworks for arriving spectators. Lillian, how can you say that? You know you're Daddy's special girl. I never meant to hurt anyone. Please, just come give me a hug. He stretched his meaty arms towards Lily beseechingly. I quickly intervened, shoving his grabby paws back forcefully. Through gritted teeth I seethed, Save your sniveling act, John. You lost any shot playing father months ago. Propelling Lily forward, I called over my shoulder, Let the courts finally set you straight. Settling into the creaky wooden benches with Lily tucked protectively under my arm, I steadied my nerves with deep breaths. We could do this. Justice would be served. I stroked Lily's baby fine hair soothingly as we awaited kickoff. Right on cue, an authoritative voice bellowed, Mitchell versus Mitchell, presiding Judge Dalton. We approached the podium as John did the same, keeping my expression schooled neutral. What followed next was a tedious hour rehashing the same tired arguments from our mediation session. John begged for leniency as an imperfect human, while I calmly recapped his endless lies and manipulation. Finally, Judge Dalton, an austere woman with spectacles perched severely on her nose, intervened. Enough, Mr. Mitchell. While your transgressions alone don't necessarily forfeit custody rights, Mrs. Mitchell makes valid claims to your parental unsuitability. John instantly reddened, opening his mouth for rebuttal, but the judge steamrolled on. There are concerning patterns here: missed school events, financial negligence regarding child support, empty promises that understandably eroded the mother-daughter trust. My heart swelled, hearing Judge Dalton finally hold John accountable. Justice was being served. Therefore, I hereby grant Mrs. Mitchell full physical and legal custody of Lillian Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell will be restricted to supervised monthly visits pending evaluation of sustained behavioral changes. She banged her gavel decisively. Court adjourned. The celebratory leap from our bench jostled several loose papers, but I didn't care one iota about decorum in that spectacular moment. Laughing joyously, I twirled a similarly elated Lily in gleeful circles. Nearby, John stood motionless, ashen-faced, as the bailiff approached to escort him out, while rattling off next steps for scheduling visit supervisor meetings. But suddenly, John shrugged off the restraint, charging towards us wildly. "You heartless bitch!" he roared, spittle flying. "You can't steal my daughter away!" Security lunged to apprehend John's bulk as he thrashed violently like a rabid animal, his blistering gaze promising unfinished business even while being dragged away in handcuffs. I instinctively clutched Lily tighter to shield her from the horrifying outburst. But as John disappeared from view, I slowly exhaled the lingering tension. We had endured the worst already. The legal system would protect us from here on out. Today commemorated much-awaited closure and the dawn of a hopeful new chapter. I tapped my heels impatiently against scuffed linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. The airport lounge television was tuned to some mindless mid-morning talk show, volume muted. Where was that blasted connection flight from Houston? Lily craned her neck expectantly beside me. We had been awaiting my parents' arrival for over 6 hours now after unexpected weather delays along their journey from Florida. Their impending first visit since my divorce, finalized last month, carried special meaning. Mother would certainly dissect every detail of the legal battle and aftermath, offering her signature unfiltered feedback. While normally exhausting, I knew her unique perspective might provide needed closure. My phone suddenly dinged with an incoming news alert. I skimmed the notification headline casually, before instantly doing a double take as the words registered fully. Biz exec John Mitchell's affair, outburst go viral, career in tailspin. Heart racing, I urgently tapped the link for more details as Lily peered over my shoulder curiously. The damning article that loaded was accompanied by the very courthouse steps photo capturing John's crazed eruption towards Lily and I weeks earlier. So that's what had been the mysterious incident. Vague whispers alluded to around John's abrupt departure from the company. I scrolled hungrily, the scandalous details sating my nosy appetite. Apparently, the amateur courthouse footage had spread rapidly across social media last month. Once John's identity was leaked by tipsters, all hell broke loose. The very workplace that once celebrated John's swaggering bravado apparently couldn't distance themselves fast enough from the wife-abandoning, tantrum-throwing villain caught on tape. Once the social media wagons circled to dig up more dirt, local press had begun circling like vultures. John's 19-year-old mistress, Jessica Stanforth's Instagram influencer aspirations provided tabloid fodder and tanked overnight. Brazen poolside selfies vanished instantly when the dotting dad community realized they had been funding her lusty lifestyle all along. John himself became persona non grata overnight, both personally and professionally. The article cited inside sources, claiming his employer received endless complaints demanding the snake's firing. Rather than withstand the judgmental scrutiny, John had apparently negotiated a hasty exit, collecting only a fraction of his remaining contract dues. I leaned back against the plastic seat with undisguised relish. So Johnny Boy was finally reaping some bitter karma after decades believing money and status placed him above common decency? Couldn't have happened to a more deserving jackass. Just then, the garbled intercom announced the next flight's long-awaited arrival. As Lily and I eagerly gathered our carry-ons, I made a mental note to clip this exposé for Mother's take later over dinner. She always did relish a salacious takedown of toxic men abusing power. After hasty introductions with the driver holding our name sign, we headed towards baggage claim. I was just pointing out the empty carousel to activate when suddenly a familiar gruff voice bellowed out. "There's my gorgeous girl." Lily's delighted squeal was soon muffled against my stepdad Dave's broad chest as he enfolded her in his signature bear hug. I quickly found myself swept up too against Dave's lumberjack frame alongside Mom's waifish one. As I soaked up the familial affection like a sponge, tears pricked unexpectedly. In my crusade against John's villainy, I had nearly forgotten the power of true unconditional love staring right at me. On the drive over, with Lily chattering happily from her perch between my parents, I gazed out at the sun-speckled skyscrapers buzzing by outside. The future shimmered with possibility now that dead weight had been shed fully. Mom reached over to pat my hand gently, compassion shining from her still youthful features. In her crinkled eyes, I glimpsed the promise of more laughter than tears in this new chapter unfolding. Leaning back against the plush leather, I let the metaphorical dust settle completely. John's downfall was merely collateral damage amid more profound lessons recently carved painfully but necessarily. Prizing truth and loyalty in all facets of life here on out would steer me right, and my daughter would thrive with fierce feminine role models lighting the way forward. "Ooh, where should we hang this one, sweet pea?" I smiled down at Lily, who was frowning at the newly printed photo in concentration, tongue sticking out adorably. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains in our bare-walled apartment, the fresh start still needing personalization. Maybe next to your accounting certificate, Mommy. Since it's another thing to be really proud of, Lily finally declared decisively. I chuckled and squeezed her shoulders affectionately at the sentiment before moving to hammer the professional portrait of myself in a sleek blazer into place. Stepping back, I surveyed our progress with swelling satisfaction. The chaotic last few months of legally severing from John, finding an affordable apartment, enrolling Lily in a new school, and relaunching my CPA business had certainly stretched me thin. But with my parents' short-term help settling things and providing free childcare, the worst was behind us. I still grappled occasionally with twinges of self-blame for uprooting Lily's stability, but so far she was adjusting admirably to her new bedroom and school community. And with each personalized fixture we assembled, her canopy bed, customized desk area, art collection, I witnessed our little nest become a sanctuary emitting hints of joyful life again. The strident ring of my cell phone interrupted our interior design planning then. I glanced down to see an unknown Denver number flashing insistently. Brow furrowing, I answered cautiously. Likely just another tedious robocall, I assumed, but instead, a hesitant female voice instead asked, am I speaking with Susan Mitchell? I mean Susan Hayes? I stiffened warily. Who was this, and how had they tracked down my cell or new legal name change? Speaking, and you are? I prompted crisply when she didn't immediately elaborate. Oh, terribly sorry. I should have introduced myself first. I'm Martha Reed. I was hoping we could talk. She rushed on breathlessly as I struggled placing the unfamiliar name. Again, you have me at a loss here, Ms. Reed, I countered bluntly, instinctually protective against unsolicited intrusions after the media spectacle lately. What is this regarding? An awkward pause followed before Martha replied delicately, as if choosing words carefully. Well, this is rather sensitive, but I wanted to provide a heads up. I recently left John Mitchell after discovering overlaps in our relationships. I nearly dropped the phone as her shy confession sank in fully. This total stranger had also been entangled with my lying ex while we were still legally married. I stammered incredulously. Wait, John was dating you while still with me and his little mistress? Unbridled fury clawed up my throat as the room tilted dangerously. That snake truly possessed zero scruples. Martha made sympathetic noises, seemingly misreading my outrage source. I know, it's absolutely shocking discovering his horrid duplicity. I never imagined John deceiving me so callously either, but that courtroom video unlocked the ugly truth. As she prattled on rehashing betrayal wounds, vindication slowly tempered my boiling vitriol. So yet another blameless woman had fallen prey to John's deceitful charm offensives before recognizing his true colors eventually. At least we could commiserate over hard lessons learned about the false fronts certain master manipulators wear. I gently intercepted Martha's tangent at the next natural pause. Well, I truly appreciate you two taking the initiative to contact me and share your experience. It definitely confirms John's pathological patterns. I chuckled mirthlessly before adding, I mainly feel sorry for whichever poor soul gets ensnared by him next once the charm stocks dwindle. We exchanged a few more pleasantries about moving forward solo as strong, wiser women. After securing Martha's number just in case, I finally hung up, feeling fully reinforced in my life redirect. Lily glanced up from her coloring inquisitively, but I just shook my head, smiling. No need exposing her innocence to John's endless deceptions. She embodied our bright future ahead rather than past darkness.